one of the interesting criticisms I've seen of like young generations, and this was one of the criticisms of my generation. I'm a millennial, and I'm right on the cusp like of Gen X versus millennial. Sure. And one of the interesting things I remember was people talking when I was in my 20s about the delay of maturation and how people were living at home longer, and they were more reliant on their family and their friends, and they're waiting longer to start families and all this stuff and like have meaningful careers, and that's only like delayed and extended. And then there's just an interesting reason for that, which is like, as you think about society as it improves and becomes more comfortable and has more resources available to everybody, the necessity to go out and mature lessens. Yeah. Right. And so the timelines, they start to lengthen, because think about, previous generations where the life expectancy was maybe in your 30s. And so you had less life to work with. Therefore, at 12 years old, you better be getting married. By 13, you better be pumping out some kids, right? And if you're gonna be pumping out kids at 13, like you better mature pretty damn quickly, right? Yeah. And so like that was a function of like what do they say? Necessity is the mother of all invention, right? Yeah. And then my other line of that is like constraints are the father of creativity, right? But we just had less to work with, and there were so many more things that could kill you that you had to accelerate your competency, therefore your maturation, right? Now, as like there's more resources, the amount of things out there that can kill you are less. Your family probably, even if they're poor, air quotes, are still rich by comparison to what your grandparents were 100, 200 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so all that means is that there's less pressure on the individual to mature quickly. So a 17-year-old doesn't have to have their shit figured. No 17-year-old today like has their shit figured out. No, and if you have a kid at 17, it's like, that's buck wild, right? Yeah. But you extend that out and it's like, okay, even 27-year-olds don't have their shit together. And 32-year-olds don't have their shit together. And so it's drawing it out because there's less necessity for them to rise to that occasion, to be mature, to start a family earlier, right? And so there's other options. There's more delayability, because even think about women, like 25, 30 years ago, if they didn't have a kid by 35, like they were done. Yeah. Like you're just not going to have kids. And so you need to have them before 35. So there's a forcing function at least to have your shit together enough to have kids by that point. And even you should probably have them before 35, because like even then like you start to run some risks, right? And so probably by 30, like that's when their biological clock really starts to tick and they start to go, oh, I should probably have my shit figured out here, right? Men never really like men are I think men are largely a byproduct of what their women need at that moment. And so it's like if the woman suddenly has the biological clock ticking, is like, I want to have a baby, the man's like, let's have a baby. And so now he becomes a father. Necessity is the mother of all invention. And so now he rises to the occasion, becomes mature, starts thinking about things outside of himself. Yeah. However, like if women no longer have to have kids at 35 because medical interventions make it so, hey, at 40 and 42, like it's still very possible to have kids. Or with IVF, you could have them even later in life. Yeah. A lot of different options. So now women maybe don't have to respond to that biological clock ticking in the same way. So then they say, well, maybe I'm going to focus on my life and my career outside of having a family. We'll delay that a little bit later. And so the delaying then forces the men in that same equation, because they're like, sweet, if the women don't want to have kids and babies and stuff, right, I'm just going to keep being a bachelor, keep doing my thing, and like, and you can make the argument that like there is a subsection of men that do want that and they're seeking that, but they're having a hard time finding it. So that's where there's like a disparity in like genders and their desires. But holistically, if you just look at how this kind of like stretches out over time, you see like the Japanese culture, where it's like birth rates are plummeting because nobody, at a certain point, they started to realize like, oh, I don't even need to have kids. Like it became culturally inappropriate to have kids or to date. And so like the delay became so long that then they lost the ability to interact with the other sex. Yeah. They became so cloistered and comfortable in isolation that they don't understand the alternative. They don't see the value in it. And so then you see like this real big problem in Japan with like birth rates plummeting. And it's like, okay, what's that mean? And across the globe, you see this happening, right? And like people talk about overpopulation, but we're not anywhere near overpopulation. We actually have a population growth problem. We're on a downward spiral. And it's like probably one of the greatest existential threats to humanity, because once you're on the downward spiral of not having enough kids to replace the population, that only compounds and accelerates
Yeah.
Right? And the cultural underpinnings that led to that situation, they don't change. They don't change on the timeline in which they would need to change, because that takes decades, right? Like, you're not going to take 20 to 30-year-olds, Gen Zs right now, and change their programming in the next 5 years to start pumping out the kids at a rate that they need to, right? And so it's like, this is a generational problem, and I think we're going to really start to feel that over the next 100 years. It's going to really play out in a dramatic way, but this is like the cycle of civilization. And you just see it playing out over and over and over again as a country moves from like third world to second world to third world. Birth rates plummet because independent spend, or like disposable income increases, luxury resources, all of those things, and then the people will start to. Before, you need, like, the best hedge against poverty in old age was kids. Once you have money and resources, the value of the children no longer has that economic value. I'm not saying kids don't have value, but they have different values. And so people are choosing to have kids for different reasons. Not saying that they chose to have kids because I need another worker in the field, but like, not no. Right? And so like, all of these things, they just create an interesting conglomeration, amalgamation of like, what's the future of humanity? What's it really look like in 1,000 years, 10,000 years? And it's like, I don't really know. I know with robots coming online, like, humans are gonna look very different even in 150 years than right now. And I mean, you look back 150 years ago, into 1870s, 1880s, it's like fundamentally different. Women couldn't vote, right? We still had slavery in a lot of places. Well, we probably still do, actually, but like, we'll be in a fundamentally different place where it's like, people aren't having kids. I think in the next 100 years, we won't see women having organic births anymore. Like, there'll be no reason for it. Besides the fact that they want to do it, right? And honestly, like, there's probably a bit for a lot of women where like, yeah, I would like to have that experience up to a certain point. Like, the first 4 months, 5 months, they were fun, right? Or like that last little bit, like, could do without. Like, so if you had a way of then transporting that baby to an external surrogate, that like a robot or a robotic womb, right? Like, I think we'll see a lot of babies growing in those environments. And so I think the way humans will populate will be very, very different than what we have historically seen. And that's the science fiction side of my brain coming to play. But I know for myself, and I'm one of those people that it doesn't have kids. I'm like 41 years old. I don't have kids, don't have intentions of having kids. So I'm on this interesting sideline of like watching it all occur. But I'm also I guess that demographic of people who's like has foregone children. And so it's like, don't take advice from that guy. Like, what's he know? And I do encourage people to like take my advice with a grain of salt if you have children. Like, you're playing a different game than I am. So good luck.